So if we start with calories,
Yeah.
what sort of surplus should we be aiming for? Because I think the classic ends of the spectrum are just eat as much as you can, get really fat
Yeah.
whilst you put on the muscle, or people are too shy to be in a surplus at all because they're scared of getting fat and they end up not putting on any
Yeah.
size. So what's the
Yeah.
thought process behind picking your surplus?
It really depends on a few factors in terms of your timeline, your time frame of how quick. Maybe you've got to get to a certain weight, or you want to hit a certain weight for whatever reason within a time frame. So 12 weeks, I want to put on 2 kilos. Like, the faster that you want to gain muscle, the higher the surplus needs to be, in simple terms. Okay. There's a really cool study that I love. It's called I've named it The Tortoise and the Hare. Okay.
Hmm.
Basically, these were really, bodybuilding. They were trained guys, and they took them and split them into two groups. Okay. The tortoise ate a modest calorie surplus of around 250 calories, and the hare group, they gave over 500 calories, 550 calories, I think. And this was over a 4 week period. Now, the aggressive bulking, so we're looking at a more of an aggressive kind of surplus. They put on like I think it was 5.3 pounds of muscle, okay, in 4 weeks. So what's that? 2.2,
That's like a lot of muscle.
2.5 kilos. Yeah,
Fuck.
but they also put on 4 pounds of fat.
Yeah.
Maybe the calorie surplus was a bit bigger, actually. A thing here. When they do it like 67.5, kilos, I can never figure that out. Just tell me what the surplus was. Probably should have done that. But it was a big surplus. But they put on 5.3 pounds of muscle and they put on 4 pounds of fat. Okay. But the tortoise group, they gained 2.6 pounds of muscle, so, just over a kilo, and only put on 0.7 pounds of fat. So if your goal is to build muscle, an aggressive surplus, it absolutely blows muscle building out of the water. Like, if you can be a higher calorie intake, we're up over 500 calories, 600 calories, and we'll talk about some overfeeding studies where we went up to 800 to 1,000 calories a day over feeding, over maintenance. Then you will gain muscle if your training stimulus is correct. Okay, so this is from a calorie point of view. Then if you're wanting to maintain a little bit of leanness, your body composition, then you need to play the long game a little bit more and understand that muscle gain is going to be slower, but you're also not going to gain as much fat. Like that, in simple terms, and the literature reflects this, that's going to be the case. Now, there's a ton of nuance around this. Like, these guys were trained. If you're very new to training, okay, so maybe you've done, I don't know, a little bit of team sports, and then you've gained a little bit of weight, and now you want to do, some more kind of, like, you really want to get in shape and you want to do strength training, then your training age is relatively low, and maybe your body fat's high, muscle mass is low. If you start training, then, and you eat at maintenance, you're going to be able to gain muscle and lose fat at the same time. The starting point is so crucial, and this is where there's so much nuance around it. As your training age increases, then the ability to recomposition, where you lose fat and gain muscle, it diminishes. And that's where then you probably need to look at adjusting your surplus based on your goal and based on your timeline. So if you've got a timeline of 6 months, for me, I would say play the long game.
Yeah.
I think gaining muscle slower but minimizing fat gain is more of a sensible strategy than bulking and cutting, because bulking and cutting is challenging. You also then impair training performance when you have to cut, because you have to restrict your calories. Whereas if you eat slightly above maintenance for an extended period of time, you still are providing the raw materials to grow. You're still providing energy to train, and you're minimizing fat gain. So then you'd only have to do a small cut to lean out or to get to an ideal body composition, as opposed to this undulating approach over a 6-month period, 3-month period, which for me is challenging on the body. You're placing stress on the body. You're having to change lots of variables. You're having to change your diet. You're having to change your habits. And for me, I think that's a less sustainable way to approach it. But obviously it comes down to context in that, what's your time frame, what's your starting point, where you're going to go. But I hope that kind of gives people an understanding of probably the best way to do it. If you haven't got a deadline, for me, you want to create a surplus of up to 250 calories a day, and that can just kind of be within that ballpark figure. And again, the literature suggests that you aren't going to put on a ton of body fat, and you are still going to provide the body with enough energy and raw materials to grow.
So, talking from experience with this, is when I had probably my biggest bulking phase, essentially, was right before I competed in my natural bodybuilding show. And the main things, I didn't calorie track, but I definitely ate enough. But the one thing I did make sure I hit was my protein, because I was able to always keep that at the top of my mind. I made sure I was aiming for around 250 grams of protein at the time. So it was quite high, because I was thinking, right, I need a lot of protein because I'm in a bulking phase. And I aimed for just as many calories as I can eat. And I can eat a lot of calories, so I wasn't worried about undershooting. However, the dieting phase then took me 6 months to then get down, because I needed to do it slow enough where I weren't just going to deteriorate and lose a load of muscle. So I've obviously just built all this muscle tissue. And you kind of alluded to it there, where you said how you can do any style of training when cutting to lose body fat. However, if you're trying to build muscle, you'll probably be doing a very similar style of training to when you was building muscle to losing body fat. However, you won't be able to necessarily push as hard when you're in that deficit. So your loading on the body will start to drop down, because not only will you probably then start lifting less, but you'll probably have to go to failure less, because the recovery rate is going to be slower. So there's a lot of, say, side effects essentially from them being in that deficit, even if you're training in the same way. So from past experiences, I've found that being in a little bit more of a surplus has been a much easier way to keep training intensity high. And if you are trying to build strength and you are trying to build muscle, that is just from experience, because then you go into all your sessions just feeling more pumped and ready to train, compared to thinking, I just got to get through today's session, even though you probably will be feeling that at times because you're feeling tired and beaten up. But you have the energy. It's more the mental fatigue that you're probably trying to battle against.
Yeah. I completely agree. You flipped it for me there. You flipped it. So you've done a very short, what I would approach is that for me, most diets should have a long-term focus on strength and performance, with very short periods focused on body composition. Okay. And this is even if you're trying to lose fat. You should focus your most of the year to be eating at maintenance, and then have very short periods where you cut. Okay, maybe that's pre-holiday, post-holiday, January, I don't know, before December. And what you can then do is maintain a better weight, and then always try to look to increase your performance. It's the same with muscle. You should always look to be, long-term approach should be at maintenance or into a very small surplus, which again is going to allow you to keep seeing progress within training, within recovery, with, hormone profile, muscle soreness being relatively low, as opposed to going for a very short bulk where you just go mental, put on a load of muscle and a load of fat. And yes, you increase your performance, but then you've got to spend long periods cutting.
Yeah, sorry.
And what that does is it's challenging for a health point of view as well as performance point of view. So if you zoomed out across the year, instead of spending what you did, half the year trying to cut, if you spent, 10 months of the year trying to just be at maintenance or above, then you can only spend very short periods of time, and you don't need to spend, you don't need to spend that much time trying to diet, and you can be relatively aggressive in 1 week, 2 weeks, 10 days to help regulate body weight. For me, that's how most people should approach it.
Sorry, I realized I didn't actually finish my train of thought when I said it, because it's where I was going with that was I put on the most amount of muscle and strength and size and just in general over a big period. But then when I then had to do a 6-month diet, that was then where it wasn't necessarily conducive. And where I was trying to go for that is because I don't like dieting. So spending a long time dieting is more stressful on me. So where I've gone wrong over the years, that's where I was trying to lead to, was I wish I'd known that and been in more of a smaller surplus, so I haven't had to keep dieting down. And that's kind of, I didn't finish my train of thought, so apologies. Yeah, I didn't mean to flip your side.
We were saying the same thing, so it's all good.
Yeah.
I think there's a couple of things that jump out at me from that discussion, and one of them is most people want to be close to being at an ideal body composition most of the time. So the only reason you should go for a big surplus is if you're in a real rush to put on the mass. But then 100%. The question that I'd like to ask you, Liam, is it, say you want to put on 4 kilos of lean muscle, what's the, I know it's a bit of a piece of string answer question, but what's the time difference if you were to do a super aggressive bulk and then maybe have a maintenance period before your cut to try and like lock in the muscle gain versus doing a slow and steady? Obviously there's a massive dependency in how big the big bulk is and how small the small surplus is. But in terms of if you are somebody who wants to put on 4 kilos lean as quickly as possible, doing the aggressive bulk and aggressive or longer cut versus the slow and steady, how long is it going to take to get to that end destination? What are the considerations when you're thinking about something like that?
Yeah, it is a little bit of it depends, because there's numerous factors. However, what you want to do then is have this kind of plot, okay, and this is where, if you want to do this, you do need to be pretty detailed with tracking. Okay, tracking your food, tracking your weight, okay, and tracking your progress. What you want to do is, those that are listening without video, you can't really see what I'm doing, but I'm creating a band, okay? So you would be like, right, 4 kilos, my starting weight is, say, 70 kilos, and I want to get to 74 kilos. And my time frame, this is where you got to be realistic. There's loads of weight gain kind of tables that will give you training age and rate of muscle gain per year. And as you get more, your training age goes up, unfortunately your rate of muscle gain gets lower. But this is, again, it can also come down to starting weight. If you haven't kind of been, so for me, I haven't reached my muscle kind of like genetic potential in terms of muscle building, because I've just been doing too many Metcons my whole life. So I haven't actually done enough training. So if I committed to it, I could, even though my training age is high, I could still get bigger, if that makes sense. Anyway, I digress. There's a band. So set a target. So say you want to be like, right, I've looked at it and I can gain 0.5 kilos of muscle a month. Okay. So I extrapolate that out and say, okay, so it's going to take me 6 months. I can be a bit more aggressive. Maybe I take it to 4 months. What you can then do is you plot 10% above and 10% below. Okay. Your target weight to that over a month period. Okay. So each month you would plot, and then you just draw 2 lines, which become 10% either side of the calories that you created, that you calculated to get there.
Love this.
So if I'm 70 kilos, I'm like, right, okay, I want to be 4 kilos heavier in that. If I bring my timeline shorter, I need to be more aggressive with my calories. The longer than my time frame is, the less aggressive. So I'm going to plot it. My maintenance is, I'm making numbers up, 2,000 calories. So I'm going to plot a surplus of 2,250 calories. Okay. So I now draw a band up to my goal. I then track my weight, and every week on average, okay, this is the key thing. You have to track every single day, and then on average plot where I'm going. If I'm dropping below my weight, so my weight then is dropping below my predicted band, so from 70 kilos to 74 kilos, then I need to increase my calories by 10%. So if I on my month 1, I'm below my projected thing of 71 kilos or 70.5 kilos, I need to increase my calories, because I'm not hitting the trajectory to get to 74 kilos. That's the key thing. It's the trajectory that you'll need to be following. So then I would adjust. And you can break this down into months, into weeks. It depends on how much detail you want to get to. So for me, I can be like, okay, I need to increase. Or if my line is now, my trend is going over, so now I've gone to 72 kilos in 3 weeks, I'm like, I'm probably eating too much. So then you can bring that back down. And this is how you're going to gain the right type of weight. It is a little bit more detailed. And I realize this is a podcast and probably a horrendous description because you can't see it without a visual. But it's about plotting your starting weight, current weight, plotting your end weight, getting into a surplus depending on the time frame that you're doing, and using weight as your measurement to see if you're on the right track. If you're gaining too quickly, we know that that's going to be predominantly body fat. Okay. If you're on the right timeline, it's going to be muscle. So it's all about plotting that trajectory. But use that thing of around kind of like, that kind of 10% calorie, if you're going above, to cut by, 10%. If you're going below, increase by 10%. Follow it, track every week, and you won't be going too far wrong.
I love that. And even without the visuals, I think just if you're picturing the graph, and when you always see like results of like a scatter graph, right? And you see all those X's and you're looking for the mean, like you're looking for that middle range, and you want to make sure all your X's are in that middle range. I love that as an idea. And I just haven't.
It's got to be a band. It's got to be a band. That's the thing.
That
people get too linear with it in terms of like exacts, but it's got to be a band, and it's what you do on average. And if you're moving in the correct way and the trend, then you'll be on the right way.
Yeah, because I think when we are on a trend, sometimes it is just then trusting that journey, that say, okay, this is going to work. We just have to stick with this and keep going with it, and we will get there. Just trust that process. But something which I just thought of is, people might be thinking, why would I want to do a really put on as much weight as possible in a short period of time? And I then thought of a practical example with myself. I competed in a powerlifting competition where I was in the bracket but at the lower end, and I couldn't diet down, so I had to eat up to get to the top end of my bracket. So I had to eat up to 110 kilos. So then when I got to a competition, I was sitting at 109. And I was heavy. I felt strong. I felt good. My calories were high. My protein was high. So and I had a time frame of, it would say, around 8 to 10 weeks. So once I decided that I was going to be in the weight category that I was in, I knew I had to eat up into it because I didn't want to be on the lower end, because I was going to be competing against heavier individuals. So if you are competing, especially in a strength sport, and you're within a bracket, and you don't mind putting on a little bit of extra fluff, then adding those, going for maybe a little bit more of an aggressive one, so you can build muscle, you can provide the building blocks for strength, and you can give yourself the energy to absolutely smash your sessions. That can be a real good takeaway.
Yeah.
A good question for you. Sorry, Ash. Why putting on extra weight, even if it's fat, how does that equate to being stronger?
My joints felt better. I felt, so like for me, when I was lifting heavier, everything just felt more comfortable. So apart from my health, I didn't feel fit, I didn't feel good, but my strength felt awesome. So like for me, it's like I can't tell you the science behind this, but it's in just like, I know when I'm heavier, I feel a lot more comfortable squatting. I feel a lot more comfortable benching. Deadlifting doesn't really matter so much, but when it comes to squatting and benching, I really feel the extra load in my body through that weight. And it's, I don't know if it's placebo or what, but I know I definitely feel stronger when I'm heavier. But with the deadlift, as I said,
mass moves mass, right?
Yeah. So, but again, it's I think that's such a common thing to say, but do we understand fully why does mass move mass? But you look at the strongest people, they're not exactly small. Don't get me wrong. We have some outliers. We do have the 60. I know there's someone called like Taylor Atwood, who's, I'm pretty sure he's like 75 kilos or something like that. Competes at like high level American USAPL, I think it is. And like the amount of weight this guy is shifting is insane. And it's like, you're talking like 400 kilos, like say like deadlift timber rate, like heavy. And he's only 75 kilos. So yeah, okay, mass moves mass, but then that's a massive outlier there. So yeah.
I think all else being equal, you have more mass, you have more inertia. Like it's easier to stabilize. Like if you're 100 kilos versus 110 kilos and you're squatting 250 kilos, having that extra 10 kilos on your body, it actually means the bar is a smaller percentage of your body mass. So it's affecting you less. It's moving you less than if you were you had the same muscle and strength capacity in a lighter body. And we are going to come on to the differences between size or strength later. But just while we're on the calories, why is it then, Liam, that builders do the bulk and cut thing rather than this slow, steady one? Surely it must be fastest to do an aggressive bulk and cut to put. So say, let's stick with that 4 kilo muscle gain, lean muscle gain example. So let's say it takes 8 months to do it the slow and steady way. Could you get to 74 kilos at the same body fat faster by doing an aggressive bulk and cut? And is it just harder? Is that why we don't recommend it?
Yeah. Well, it depends. It can be easier, because you've got to be consistent for less amount of time. So if consistency is your issue of following a diet and going all in for potentially 3 months, and doing a 2-month bulk or whatever, and being super aggressive and then being relatively aggressive with your cut would get you to a body weight. But then you're looking at solely body weight and composition as your goal. Like Rob said there, health is disregarded, performance would probably be disregarded, in that you're focusing on a number. And if that's the goal, or if you focus on an aesthetic, and if that's a goal, that's totally cool. You could probably do that. However, if you're pretty good at just kind of, being relatively consistent with your diet, then you can play the slow and steady one. Yeah. That's an easier way then, if you find it easier. Like, some people find it hard to eat a lot of, and if you potentially can't train enough, again, that's a big variable. If you can't actually create the stimulus for that growth, overeating is just going to make you put on more fat. Whereas if you can train 6 times a week at a high intensity, high volume, maybe double days, do everything outside of that, then bulking and cutting in a short period of time is going to be more beneficial. So yeah, you can do it, buddy, quicker. It's just
great. Nice,
probably a lifestyle thing more than anything.
Yeah, I do feel the bodybuilding, from what I've stayed in touch slightly with it, but just because I am still interested by that world. And I think the idea of going for full-blown bulk into a massive cut has kind of gone by the wayside a little bit. I think they've started to understand that they're even especially we're talking a lot more like the natural bodybuilder side of stuff, because then they haven't necessarily got all the extra supplementation to provide themselves with the deficiencies that they might be getting when they're in a deficit. There's natural bodybuilders generally stay leaner, so they're more on the steady maintenance, getting slowly bigger compared to the assisted. But even then, with the assisted lot, I remember, this is probably going about 5-6 years ago, it's about the Phil Heath era, around that. Then when people were getting into their off seasons, it wasn't just smash back burgers, pizzas, and just put on all their previous weight and then train. It was actually, let's reverse diet, let's start to build in and actually stay a little bit more show ready, because they were doing a lot more guest appearances and stuff like that. So I think the old school way of doing things, of massive bulk and then this 6-month cut, has kind of just dissipated slightly. I think mainly for the health side of stuff as well.